This is Terrence Andre Banks with the Information Age Financial Solutions, coming to you today looking at Robert Kiyosaki's recent article he did about November 14th, The Axis of Assets. Now, the title didn't step out to me, but the information involved with it, because I'm a huge fan of Robert Kiyosaki. I believe he provides a lot of great information, especially for the information age, and giving you an opportunity to be your own boss and at least give you an idea on financial education, which is huge. In fact, he was one of the things that started me thinking in a completely different mindset and fully understanding and diving into financial education as a whole. And what does that mean? But this article is The Axis of Assets, and it's talking about the changing landscape of the oil industry. Definitely worth your time. Look at his website, richdad.com, and he has a blog there on that. But I'm going to read the article for you because it just puts out a number of different things that, again, being in the United States, we don't think about these things enough. Now, I've done a video way back about oil and its importance because oil controls economies, it controls everything that we do because it's a form of energy. If energy changes and goes to someone else, we've been under the Petro Dollar, and what that means is that our currency has been able to flourish, and we've been taking on massive amounts of debt and allowed to without any corrections for a while because our ability for oil is energy to be placed in dollars. So again, look at this article, but I'm going to get into reading it. The changed landscape of the oil industry. Thousands of years ago, Rome was the biggest empire in the world. Now he's giving a comparison to the Rome in America here, and that's why when I started reading it, you'll see what I'm talking about as I continue reading, why it's of such importance. Rome was the biggest empire in the world. At the time, it stretched from Europe through the Middle East and into North Africa. It was so large that they coined the term Imperium Sine Fine. I'm not knowing if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it means which meant empire without end. To the Roman citizen, it seemed as if the empire would last forever. Sound familiar? A lot of Americans believe that as well. Nothing's going to happen in America. America is just the best. And it is. I mean, we have some great opportunities and stuff like that. But every great dynasty, if you look out history, has through turmoil, and they can change and fall. Nothing could stop it, but like all empires, it did stop. The average Roman citizen never saw it coming, however, because they were living in such extravagance and ignorance to what was happening in the world around them. This ignorance was famously satirized by the Roman poet Juvenal, who coined the phrase panem et circenses, which meant bread and circuses. Juvenal was speaking to the political reality that if a government provided cheap food and ample entertainment, its citizens would not pay attention to reality and revolt. Sounds very familiar now. His contention was that the average Roman citizen has traded in his birthright to freedom in exchange for panem et circenses, which means bread and circus. Eventually, the Roman Empire did fall, and while there were many reasons why this happened, you can bet that the Roman citizens didn't fully realize them then until it was much too late. Repeating histories. Another common phrase is those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And today we may be seeing this come to reality in the United States. Americans have plenty of bread and circuses to enjoy. Currently our country and our media are obsessed with President Trump's administration and Russian ties. And when we're not obsessing over that story, we're binge watching Stranger Things or watching NFL. These things dominate our national conversation, but rarely is there mention of global realities. That's definitely true. This is why I recently wrote on Twitter, create your own reality, don't live in someone else's. Words to live by. I'm convinced that the powers that be in the U.S. definitely want you living in the reality of bread and circuses, not the reality of what is happening in the global economy. And this is when it really picks up and gets really interesting. This is why I won't be surprised if you haven't read this article yet. China sees new world order with oil benchmark backed by gold. Very worth repeating. It's an article, and if you haven't read it, I would be surprised if you don't fully comprehend the importance of it. This is not a knock on anyone's intelligence. It's just a commentary on how hard it is to learn about important things that are happening in the world. And if China sees China sees new world order with oil benchmark backed by gold. Now, when you get to the article, it's worth a click on that. I read that one too. But let me digress and go back to what this article is about. This is why I made it my mission to educate people on what is happening in the economy and help spread financial knowledge and growing financial intelligence. So how does oil work? In order to understand why this article is so important, we must first understand how the global oil market works. Currently, the global oil markets are dominated by what is called the petrodollar. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in this video. In simple terms, the petrodollar system means that the majority of oil sold in the world is pegged to a fixed US dollar price. This means that when any country sells oil, they receive payments in US dollars. This system, built by Nixon with the Saudi Arabians in 1974 after the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, the gold-backed dollar, ensured that the US dollar would be the reserve currency of the world, since oil is the world's biggest commodity. What is more, many countries often receive much more petrodollars than they need when they sell oil, so they recycle them, as Investopedia writes. These surplus dollars are spent on domestic consumption, lent abroad to meet the balances of payments of developed nations, or invested in US dollar denominated assets. This last point is the most beneficial for the US dollar, as the petrodollar makes their way back to the US. These recycled dollars are used to purchase US securities, such as treasury bills, which creates liquidity in the financial markets, keeps interest rates low, and promotes non-inflationary growth. Moreover, the OPEC states are able to avoid currency risk of conversion and invest in secure American investments. Obviously, a system like this is very advantageous for the United States, despised by growing superpowers. So enter China in the article in question. China and oil. And author Damon Emily writes, China is expected shortly to launch a crude oil futures contract priced in yuan and convertible into gold, and what analysts say could be a game changer for the industry. In short, China is seeking to create an alternative to petrodollars with their own currency, the yuan, by issuing all contracts in yuan backed by gold futures. Again, he gives so much information. He explains why this is important. As Syria Jirad writes for CNBC, the yuan is not yet fully convertible. It's fixed daily, prone to intervention, subject to capital controls. Given that the regime of tight control over the currency, many global powers are likely, likely to assume a yuan-denominated oil benchmark will be firmly under Beijing's thumb. Backing the contracts by gold futures allow for some transparency in this system as well as stability. Perhaps more concerning is that while the U.S. investors obviously won't flock to yuan-based oil contracts, a good portion of the world might, especially those countries under U.S. sanctions such as Russia and Iran. Now, we already know that we've been having a lot of issues with Russia and Iran. It's been constantly broadcasted in the news. But again, America is one country out of many. And as this shifting of global powers continues to take place, especially with oil, because like I mentioned before, oil controls everything. Without energy, you can't do anything. So if China is successfully in setting up an alternative to the petrodollar, it can mean devastation for the U.S. economy as the recycling of petrodollars dries up and liquidity in the U.S. capital system slows to a trickle. They're all linked. China, who is a major oil importer, who also has one of the largest reserves of gold in the world, knows this. They're looking to take control of the price of both commodities and, by extension, become the dominant world power. In his famous speech after 9/11, President George Bush spoke about the axis of evil, countries that endorse and support global terrorism. Today, we should be talking about the axis of assets. That's where his title comes in. Global coalitions lining up to change the global economy and the way in which money flows across the world. That money, oil is everything. And without it, you don't have any economies. So that's why it's so important. And this article just is ringing with chock full of information, and it's definitely worth your time to take a look at and read. So let me continue on. Whether China is successful or not is not my point in this article. Rather, my point is that this is a major story that the majority of Americans will never have even heard about and not even understand. Yet hopefully you can see how it will have a major impact on you, your family, and your finances. Should China win in the oil wars, many people will lose their wealth. However, those who are financially intelligent, who focus less on bread and circuses and more on what is truly happening in the world, can prepare for such circumstances and even thrive in them. Whatever may be in the future, I urge you to be vigilant and pay attention. Your financial future depends on it. Again, definitely worth your time. Take a look at it. Oil controls everything. And this has been any value to, please put a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Until my next video, I'm out.